Welcome to the Conservation Chronicles, the podcast for the Wildlife Trust for Lancashire, Manchester and North Merseyside. I'm your host, Jenny Benyon, and today I'm joined by our CEO, Dr. Tom Burditt. Tom is really instrumental in shaping kind of the whole vision for Lancashire Wildlife Trust, what we do all day, really fighting for nature. So yeah, let's welcome Tom and let's just find out a bit more about what we actually do all day. So, okay, let's start at the beginning. What got you into nature in the first place? Why are you doing this instead of being, I don't know, a lawyer or an accountant or something?
You sound like my school careers advisor. I do actually remember when I was, I don't know, what I would have been 14 or something, and going and seeing, and they said, what do you want to do when, well, like, you know, as a job? And I said, well, I think I'd like to be a conservationist. And they just looked at me like I was completely insane. And they said, what do you mean that's not a job?
No,
you want
really?
to be like a doctor or accountant or something? And I said, well, I don't really want to do that. I want to sort of save the natural world. So I genuinely can't really remember a time when this isn't what I wanted to do. But also, I don't really know where my love of nature came from, because I almost feel like I was born with it. I can never remember a time when I didn't love nature.
Yeah.
And neither of my parents was massively into the natural world. I don't remember, you know, going off bird watching with my parents or anything like that.
Okay.
I mean, my mum was a nurse, my dad was an accountant. My grandma was quite into birds, so she used to feed birds in the garden, and she was always loved, you know, like hedgehogs and stuff like that. And occasionally she'd take us off to the estuary to go and look at birds there.
Right.
I remember I was, you know, being involved in scouts, so I remember with that, like going off and running around, like woods and heathlands and stuff like that. But yeah, it's really weird. I don't really know where it comes from. I think it just feels like it was always there.
Just kind of inbuilt.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you've always had this love of nature and the natural world. So how did you end up as our CEO? Like what brought you to Lancashire Wildlife Trust's doorstep?
So I guess the end of the story, I suppose, is that the job became available and I applied for it, right? Which is a thing. It was a very weird year though, because it was during the COVID lockdown.
Yeah.
So my predecessor, Anne Selby, had been CEO of the Wildlife Trust for 27 years.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where you just assume that it will never even come up as an opportunity, because I think everybody thought that Anne would just be around forever. So yeah, and then that COVID year was very odd. It was like, you know, lots of, I think the whole world just felt very, you know, very strange.
Everything was just upside down, wasn't it?
So, I mean, at the time I was working for the National Trust. So I'd been at the National Trust for 10 years. Yeah. 3 of those I was lead ranger for Morecambe Bay. And Morecambe Bay is kind of my great love, really.
Yeah.
And then I was 7 years as a general manager for the North Lakes in the Lake District. So what's amazing about being a general manager is you're responsible for everything that happens on your patch.
Yes, of course.
And in North Lakes, I had some of the best places in the world, really, because it included Wild Ennerdale.
Yeah.
There was the birthplace of William Wordsworth and Dorothy Wordsworth as well.
Yes.
So we used to do quite a lot about kind of nature, poetry, and sort of trying to engage with that. And Borrowdale and Buttermere. So we had all these amazing sort of what's now called Celtic rainforest, but the Atlantic oak woods of there. And we had the lakes and the mountains, 20 tenant farms. It was really amazing. So it was actually a really good kind of learning ground, I think, for being a CEO.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you know, during that COVID year, I think there was a lot of change, and then the job became available, and it was a bit weird. So I'd actually been busy designing my perfect charity.
Oh, really?
I don't know where it came from, but I kind of woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Do you remember that amazing spring?
Yes.
So the COVID year.
Yeah.
There was it just was, the sun shone every day, and the wildflowers had been amazing.
It was
spring.
stunning.
There were birds everywhere because people weren't out in the landscape, and so actually
we could hear them.
It was amazing.
So much traffic,
like nesting. And I sort of remember waking up one morning and kind of going, you know, designing my perfect charity, and then someone I knew who was actually was in the process of being made redundant that year because of course there was so much change. Just said, I've just seen this, and it sounds like you, and it was like, I didn't even open it. It was like, there's only one job in the world that would even make me open it, and that would be Lancashire Wildlife Trust. And when it was there, and I just absolutely couldn't believe it. And yeah, so what was really weird is that I realised that the charity that I'd been designing was basically Lancashire Wildlife Trust. So it was an amazing sort of process really through that whole year.
That's brilliant.
But I mean, going right the way back. I mean, I went to university. I studied natural sciences, and I have to admit, I got very a bit disenchanted by it.
Right.
Because I think two things had happened. One of them was that I went to university, and all I was learning about was like other places, like wildlife in other countries,
right,
or like kind of global issues, and that's really, really important. But it never felt personally connected with maybe my own motivations. And I think the other thing that happened was I was there studying natural sciences. I was at Cambridge as well, so it was like you don't sort of turn that down when you have the opportunity. And I got there and I realised that I wasn't a scientist, which was quite a kind of crushing realisation that, okay, so like this was the thing that I thought was the right path for me, and I didn't like the course, and the whole thing just felt a bit, I don't know, just like it wasn't for me. It just didn't really land and resonate and connect with like my motivations and the things that made me tick.
Right.
So eventually, I mean, I actually dropped out of university. I feel like I should like give a message to the kids, like don't drop out of university. Actually, I wouldn't say that. I would say I think you need to listen to the voice inside you.
Got to do what's right.
And I remember at the time it felt like, I mean, everyone was telling me you're just making this enormous mistake. And I remember on the day that, this is going to sound like I'm a crazy person, but the day that I made my decision was actually, I saw a little owl in a tree. And the little owl basically I took it as a bit of a sign that I was doing the right thing. So I basically left university. I worked as a chef for a while, and then went to agricultural college.
Right.
And I grew up in Somerset.
Yeah.
And I went to basically my local agricultural college, and it was just unbelievably amazing.
Really?
Yeah. And so I was sort of learning actually how to do things. So I didn't grow up with an agricultural background, but I was learning to drive tractors and fell trees with a chainsaw, and hedge laying and dry stone walling, tree planting. We had to do sort of landscape design. We had a resident artist who was a sort of landscape artist who was kind of there working with the students, got to work at the local agricultural show. Yeah. It was just unbelievably amazing, learning about, like, the birds and flowers of the place that I lived and grew up, rather than just things happening overseas, and got introduced to the whole, at the time it was called Local Agenda 21, I don't know if you remember it, but it was Think Global, Act Local.
Oh, yes.
And the whole point is that we don't solve global problems by, going elsewhere and telling people what to do. We do it by making a difference in the place that we're from. Yeah. So for me, that was just really life-changing. So actually getting involved and starting conservation volunteering in my local place. I remember I got an opportunity. I've always been quite into hares.
Oh, I love hares.
I know.
They're amazing.
And I think because they're a kind of magical species, aren't they?
They just seem...
They hang out at dusk or at dawn, you don't really see them. And I got an opportunity to radio track brown hares.
Oh, wow.
Working for like the local university, they were just sort of advertising for people to volunteer, and I didn't have lectures on a Wednesday, and they needed someone on a Wednesday, so it felt amazing.
Perfect.
So I spent a year every Wednesday getting up ridiculously early and going out into the countryside near where I lived and radio tracking brown hares, and it was just incredible, really, really incredible.
Yeah, I bet it was.
So then after that, you're like, yeah, I'm hooked now. So then when I did eventually finish my studies, I applied for a job with my local wildlife trust, and ended up at Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust. So I was a woodland manager for about 10 years. And I've always been interested in things like traditional crafts. Yeah. So I had a job, it was actually like an assistant project manager, and it was, had to generate, it was about markets for local coppice produce as a way of keeping it going. So things like selling material for thatching or hedge laying. Yeah. So thatching spars, stakes and heatherings for hedge laying, pea and bean sticks for allotment holders, material for traditional hazel hurdles. Had a firewood round and all of this. But the thing that I learned really on, pretty much on my first day, was I was supposed to be generating all this sort of markets for the produce, but we weren't really there wasn't really any produce. So very quickly, I was then had to basically kind of reinstate coppice cycling in this amazing ancient woodland near Bristol. It was just, it's called Lower Woods. And I totally fell in love with it. It was this kind of relic medieval landscape. It was just an extraordinary place, had amazing volunteers, amazing management committee. And so slowly I had to sort of grow not just the coppice material, but actually reinstate like actually the practice of cutting it, you know, and this is kind of an ancient, you know, thousands of years worth of, you know, cutting down the trees, and then the shoots will regrow, and then what you're doing is harvesting the regrowing shoots. Worked, you know, had to basically build up volunteer groups to come and help to cut it all down. And it was just the most amazing 10 years, really, just basically kind of living and working in this, just one of the most beautiful places ever.
Place. So if we're kind of moving on, you're here, you're in Lancashire, Manchester and North Merseyside. I know you've mentioned Morecambe Bay, but like, what are some of the things that are really special about here, about this place, and about what we're working and trying to kind of support and make better? What do you really love?
So I think for me, the big revelation that I suppose I had, you know, working in the Lake District, but living in Lancashire. Yeah. And I'd been having to sort of drive up to go to work. And it was that COVID year, I think. And it was like this amazing feeling that wildlife isn't something that anyone should have to sort of drive to or visit to another place. Is this feeling that wildlife should be like where we all live as part of our everyday experience. Yeah. And it shouldn't be something that you have to travel for, but should just be there. So I'm a massive believer that, you know, we all, you know, like wildlife is a sort of right. You know, we know that it, you know, it gives us joy. We know that the natural world just has all these amazing functions. It's like pretty much anything you need to invent to solve one of society's problems, like nature does it. Yeah. So, so I'm a great believer in trying to bring nature back to the places where, you know, where we all live. And I think Lancashire, I think is really, really special like that. I mean, all three of our counties, because it's not sort of maybe, I think other parts of the country maybe have more showy wildlife or more famous wildlife, but I don't think there's anywhere where wildlife is sort of quite as embedded in just the sort of ordinary everyday places. So I absolutely love the fact that our Wildlife Trust is so embedded in the towns and cities, not just in the countryside. And somewhere like the Flashes of Wigan and Lee is just the most incredible story, because it's the old coal fields, they sort of collapsed and then got flooded, and the wildlife's come back. You know, we've now got the first sort of brownfield national nature reserve, post-industrial national nature reserve in the country. Wigan is now the greenest borough in England. It's so cool. It's just incredible. And I think the fact that, you know, our Wildlife Trust really helped to make that happen. And I think there's something around the partnership nature of what we do as well. Like, we're not a big wealthy charity. We haven't, you know, been in place for 100 of years with, you know, wealthy founders and benefactors. We've had to achieve what we achieve through working with other people. So somewhere like Flashes of Wigan and Lee, where, you know, a lot of that land is owned by the council. So we, you know, we work with the council, and Wigan Borough Council have been amazing as a partner in that landscape. But also, you know, we have to work with all the local friends groups and the people, you know, of those towns, you know, but, you know, Wigan and Lee and that area. So I think that for me just represents us at our absolute best, really. Absolutely. You know, that way of working, the working in a kind of ordinary place where people would have, I mean, you see the photos, don't you? Like, you know, the 80s, it's just a sort of black landscape. And now it's thriving.
Now, and there's willow tip.
Thriving with wildlife. It's really amazing. Or like, so we just had Supporters Day on Saturday. So this is where a lot of our members, volunteers and other supporters, you know, we come and we celebrate really what we're all up to. And, you know, there are talks and workshops and things. I spent some time on the workshop with the Holton Moth Group.
Oh, lovely.
And it's just absolutely brilliant just to hear stories so from Widnes and in North Merseyside, and just the sense in which, you know, that was almost like where people went and dumped all the chemical waste. And now there's just this incredible thriving group of volunteers who have been basically monitoring moths, so trapping moths in a kind of humane ways, you know, using moth lamps and wine ropes and all these amazing things, and just white sheets they've invented.
So cool.
And just, you know, going around these sort of, you know, extra-industrial sites around Widnes, you know, in back gardens, in sort of these bits of green space that are kind of reclaimed the industrial past, absolutely thriving with moths. They're so beautiful, those species. Well, just the delight they have in either the abundance of moths or the new species that are coming in and reclaiming that. And that for me is what we're all about. I just think it's incredible.
Definitely.
I wouldn't want to work for like, you can keep your maybe more rural wildlife trust. I think for me that is like, I wouldn't want just anywhere. It is something very special about this place, I think.
So in your role as CEO, kind of what is it, firstly, what are some of the things you do all day, but what is it that you want to see us doing? Is it that kind of, partnerships and supporting because there's already this amazing work that's going on by lots of individuals, small groups, volunteers. Is that something that we want to be kind of doing more of and trying to bring together?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, you'll be aware, I think, hopefully these sort of, goals are getting out there now in the public consciousness, but there's the one that the Wildlife Trusts are working for all around the country at the moment is 30% of land and sea in nature recovery by 2030.
Yes.
And actually what's brilliant is that is now adopted as an IUCN target. So the kind of, the United Nations bit of that's looking after nature.
Yeah.
The Wildlife Trust were actually a founder member of the IUCN, which not very many people know. But, that 30% of land and sea goal is something that's been taken on, more widely. Government talking about it now, embedding it as one of their targets.
Do you think we'll reach it?
Well, we're a long way away. I think it's really important to have aspirational goals.
Yeah.
And I think so the thing about 30% of land and sea in nature recovery by 2030 is it is theoretically achievable.
Yeah.
I mean, if you actually think about, certainly in a county like us, if you think about somewhere like the Forest of Bowland and Pendle Hill, you think about the peatlands that are designated in the West Pennine Moors, you actually think about the amount of intertidal habitat that we have. We mentioned Morecambe Bay, the Ribble Estuary, the Mersey, and our coastlines. It is theoretically achievable. We have these targets now embedded within all the local nature recovery strategies. So I think the one for Greater Manchester, I think, is actually looking over 30%.
Right.
If you take on board, you've obviously got the Peak District, you've got the Great Manchester mosslands around Chat Moss. You're thinking about local nature reserves, wildlife corridors. The Liverpool City Region 1 have even mapped nature on all the verges and the railway lines, and the traffic islands and stuff. So I mean, it is achievable, but to get there is going to need two things. It's much bigger than just what we can deliver ourselves at the Wildlife Trust. So we have to work in partnership. We have to be an organisation that inspires or facilitates other people to do it. Kind of demonstrates, what good looks like. So if you think about, a lot of our peatland, it's still being used to grow food on.
Yes.
And we clearly, we can't stop growing food because it's important that, we have food to eat and we're not importing it.
Yeah.
But I think one of the really amazing things that we do as an organisation is, yes, we're famous for restoring these amazing sort of lowland bogs, these raised bogs at somewhere like Winmarleigh, near Lancaster, or Chat Moss. But actually, if we're going to really change the world, if we're really going to move towards 2030, I don't think we can just be involved in restoring these kind of wildlife sort of reserves where effectively people don't really go in, other than maybe the occasional researcher or, bird watchers around the edge. We have to come up with different ways of managing the land that are both better for wildlife, better for climate, but are also enabling people to make a living from it. So the wetter farming work, the paludiculture work that we do is a great example. Sorry.
No, I was just saying we've got an entire podcast episode on our work on the peatlands and stuff. So if people wanted to find out more, obviously have a quick listen to that one.
But the idea of, we know that the land is getting wetter because the rain is getting harder and sea levels are rising, which means that the lowlands around our sort of coastal strip, it's harder to drain them because, of course, you're draining into a sea that's rising. It just gets harder to keep that land dry. So we have to come up with ways of farming in wetter soils, and then that's good for waders to feed in as well. So I think those kinds of work will hopefully will move us to 2030, but in a way that is like working in partnership with local businesses, with the farming community. I think that's where we need to go. And yes, working with in the cities, working with community groups, volunteers. So yeah, you can hear like I think it's very achievable, but it's going to need partnership working. It's going to need innovation.
Right.
And I think I said a little while ago, like there's two things. So we've got to do all that, but we are going to need to get to 2030. There are going to need to be, I think, some genuine transformations. There are going to need to be some big, sort of bold, brave decisions. As well.
What kind of things do we need to be looking at?
Okay, so you asked me like, what do I do all day?
Yep.
Like, no 2 days are the same ever. Every day is different, and even from 1 hour to the next, it's really, really different. I actually spend very little time just sort of like in an office, I don't know, like at a computer, because you can't really be, I don't know,
there's only so much you
leading
can do
an organisation. I know,
screen,
but one of the things I got to do recently was I got to go to Paris with other Wildlife Trust CEOs, and I think what was amazing there was that the mayor of Paris had decided that there wasn't going to be kind of nature recovery for the benefit of the citizens of Paris by tinkering around the edges.
Okay.
So the mayor had a couple of really bold visions. One of them was to clean up the River Seine in time for the Olympics.
Yes.
And so the idea of wanting to be able to swim in the River Seine. And so now there are swimming beaches, there are 3. Yes. And you can go and you can swim. But you don't get that overnight. You do that by working at catchment scale around the whole of the River Seine catchment to look at reducing pollution into the river. And some of that is from agricultural sources, and some of that is kind of sewage and water, kind of wastewater treatment. But actually investing in the whole catchment management to make change, building holding reservoirs and things both above ground and even below ground to tidy up that river so that people could swim in it. Like that needs vision and that needs long-term planning.
Yeah.
And you don't get that by just waking up one morning and go, let's tinker with this and that. It has to be big. And then the other bit was actually trying to bring nature back to the streets of Paris as well. So Paris is not a particularly green city. I'd never been before, but it is quite urban. But the vision was that to try and bring nature back in whatever way was possible. So you go there, a lot of the concrete town squares and plazas are basically being dug up, and trees are being planted, and places like for wildflowers, like in the middle of the squares. There's a project where any citizen of Paris can apply for a small amount of money to do even tiny things. So we were seeing where people had basically broken up the concrete on the pavement outside their door and then planted vines and growing plants so that then they would cover the side of their building in basically kind of pollinating vines.
That's amazing.
And climbers, so that then butterflies and insects would be attracted to feed on it. There's a thing which is kind of like a streets for children, where roads near schools are basically being pedestrianised, and so half of it is for walking and cycling to school, and then the other half is covered in trees. Groups can apply for a licence, so on land that's owned by the city council, to basically kind of rewild it or grow local food or whatever. So we even saw one person who was growing dyeing plants for homemade dyes.
Oh, cool.
One person who'd had a cut flower business that was going into the florists in the city, so that they were kind of flowers grown in.
Gosh,
actually in
like
Paris, but then you go along and then you buy them. So when you're having your Emily in Paris moment, like walking around the streets of Paris with flowers, they're actually grown in the city.
You've actually got beautiful.
So it's really amazing. And I think the bit that really resonated with me the most was this belief that if people get used to a city which got more green space in it, then they will like it, and then they will fight to keep it. And I think sometimes we have a different attitude in this country, which is, do I have a mandate for this? What's this going to, like politicians, what's this going to do for my polling numbers? Or, and we've seen that driving, frankly, some really horrible behaviours, I think, at the moment in wider politics, where it's sort of, playing to the kind of base instincts. And in Paris, they were like, no, we think that people will like it. And actually the support for those initiatives is really growing.
Yeah.
You know, so people like it when they come to experience it, and then they don't want the trees removed, and suddenly the street where the kids can walk to school with the fruit trees above them suddenly going back to a place where there are cars.
Yeah.
So I just think there's something around being very visionary and having a very positive vision of the future, and playing to people's sort of hopes and aspirations rather than their kind of fears. And that is something that could easily be done in Liverpool or Manchester or Preston or Blackburn or wherever.
That was what I was going to ask. It's like, what can we as a local wildlife trust do to kind of, facilitate that change, or, set some wheels in motion to get it going?
Yeah.
Where is our role as Lancashire Wildlife Trust in that?
I think one of our roles is about creating places that are already kind of modelling what good looks like, so that other people can then maybe be inspired by that and go and do something similar in their area. I think there's something around bringing people together, because we all, any positive change has always got community at the heart of it.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to do something on your own, but if you've got other people who are also doing similar things that you can kind of work with, or, share difficulties and failures with them, actually it can really help, I think, to have other people to talk to about doing a similar thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I think we are already doing this, but we probably need to do it in more places. So, one of my absolutely favourite places that we have is the Wigan Country Park greenhouses.
It's the best.
It's just it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And I think...
Got another podcast episode there as well.
Brilliant. So I'm going to name check Andy Mather, a member of our staff who works in Blackburn, and he came across the derelict greenhouses and was just like, this doesn't feel right, and took it on as a sort of personal mission, and then suddenly grew this kind of army of volunteers to restore these greenhouses.
Yeah.
But the idea that then the people involved in that project, some of them coming, there for mental health reasons, kind of being what we call green social prescribing, being prescribed by doctors.
Another podcast episode on
great.
that as well.
I'm introducing all the others. But I think, the idea, I've been there, I've chatted to some of the participants, some of the volunteers who have gone and then have gone back and done like Ginnell rewilding projects, and they've gone, right, I'm going to go back to my street and I'm going to put planters in the alleyway behind my houses, because I want, I know that now I can grow food. I know now that if I grow pollinator plants, that the insects will come. And so going away and doing that in their street, or there was the one lady I met, and she basically started growing food in her front garden on her terrace.
Great.
And no one else was in her street, but she kind of grew in confidence and so started doing it. And then her neighbours were all like, I didn't realise that you could do that. Like, how do we do that? And then she was starting to teach her neighbours.
Wow.
I think that for me is where it gets really, really, really exciting.
Yeah.
And you'll know, but the greenhouses, the way that now, that did start, they're old horticultural greenhouses. So to start with food growing, kind of resurrect, food growing there, and there were the cold frames and all the rest of it. That was a good place to start. But now we're growing on plants to go up and restore the moors.
Yeah, there's sphagnum moss being grown in there, and cotton grasses, and loads of these peatland specialist plants. And
it's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
So people from Blackburn and Darwin kind of getting involved in growing these, and then either contractors or volunteers or staff going back up onto the moors and then planting them.
Yeah.
And then that's really, really good for wildlife, but also it's good for the climate, because it's helping now to sequester carbon and lock carbon dioxide in. And it's also, there's a natural flood management project up there, because it's reducing flash flooding in Darwin.
Yeah.
And this is this whole kind of grown up sort of cycle, but it does often need Lancashire Wildlife Trust at the heart of it to kind of help to make that happen. So I think often our role is an inspirer, facilitator, doing a really good project that then others can go, oh wow, okay, so it is possible. Just going back to the moors, I think both in the uplands and the lowlands, the team of staff at our Wildlife Trust have done things that people said was impossible. So if you go to Chat Moss, some of the peat there had been stripped down to 10...
Little Walden Moss is the one that's springing to mind
right now. Is it 10 centimetres depth?
Yeah. There's very little in some places now.
And it was removed, for horticultural, ironically, for horticultural peat for growing plants in, food in. In some cases, the turf farming as well that just slowly removes the peat. And then, so the team to sort of innovate and invent techniques, and some of it's trial and error, to show that you can actually get this fully functioning peat bog in 10 years is amazing.
Yeah.
Or the contour bunding going in above Darwin, where they were sort of taking techniques from other places and showing that you can actually restore peat on relatively steep slopes, and you can hold the water on those moors.
Yeah.
It sometimes does need that kind of specialist expertise.
And how does your role as CEO kind of fit into that? Like, are you sort of driving that forward, or are you the person that's sort of sitting there going like, well, it's an idea. How are we going to make it work?
Okay. So I think one of the amazing things about being a CEO is that you kind of like, I think it's called living vicariously through other people.
Yeah.
So there's very little that I'm actually doing where I am the person delivering the project. But what I have to do is try and set up things behind the scenes that mean that then other people can thrive. And that works on every level. So to a certain extent, it works at the level of sort of organizational culture and finance.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I'm responsible for making sure we have a budget that balances, that we have enough money to pay for all the things we need to do. And if we don't have enough money, then we have to either, do less or get more money.
Yeah.
So on one level, there has to be a business plan that sets our priorities.
Yeah.
And partly that's a kind of contract between us and our board of trustees, our volunteer board that we report to. But there's also, so that people are clear, like, in their annual objectives, that there's a kind of golden thread between, what an individual in the organisation is responsible for, what their team is responsible for, and how that links through to our organisational goals.
Okay.
So there's a lot of that goes on. I spend a lot of time chairing meetings, and I think chairing meetings is quite good because you're actually, it's sort of plays to strengths in a way, because ultimately, as chair, the decisions that are taken, you're responsible for making sure that a decision is taken.
Yeah.
But you're not doing that in a particularly directive way. What you've got to do is make sure that, everyone at that meeting has had a chance to speak and air their views, and that you're actually, you're making a decision based on, the different evidence that people are presenting, or the different opinions, the different mood in the room, and coming up with something that ultimately everyone is happy with is going to move that forward. So I do quite a lot of that.
Yeah.
And I think there are times when, you'll come in and like, so when I started, go back to peatlands again, one of the observations that was made was that firstly, most of our peatland restoration was in the lowlands, not in the uplands. Like, that's what our strength was, and yet we have some of the most incredible upland peat.
Absolutely stunning.
We've got Bowland, and we've got the West Pennine moors in particular. So why don't we have like a peat partnership covering the uplands, like Yorkshire Peat Partnership, which is hosted by Yorkshire Wildlife Trust.
Have done a lot of really amazing work.
Yeah. So that's a good example where you come in, and then, one of my roles then was to kind of link up with the other peat partnerships around the north of England. There's something called the Great North Bog, which is where all the peat partnerships come together. Very early on was involved in getting funding from Esme Fairburn Foundation, along with the other peat partnerships, that basically meant that we could create an upland peat team.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of start with why are we not doing that? Or wouldn't it be amazing if, and then work behind the scenes. Once we get the money, then we recruit people, and then, Alex and Nathan and Emily and other people involved in Lancashire Peat Partnership, they then totally smash it and find funding to deliver the actual peat restoration, make the links with some wonderfully supportive landowners in the West Pennines. Really, really fantastic. Landowners and farmers, just like really wanting to kind of bring wildlife, like the wildlife they remember when they were kids, back to the moors. really, really incredible. Or in the case of Bowland, it's like, well, we've got the Forest of Bowland National Landscape, what used to be called the AONB.
Yeah.
It's around actually them working in partnership with them and just allowing them to get a team and to lead on it in that. So, our role is different in different places.
It's about finding the right way to achieve those kind of goals, which are actually quite common across different people and partners and organisations.
So sometimes it's like, someone will ask you a question and they go, well, why are we not doing this? And then you go away and you think about it and go, why aren't we? Why aren't we doing that? That's a really good idea. And then you have to do the very first bit of like looking into it and then sort of setting it up in a way that you bring in the right people to do it.
Yeah.
Or sometimes, that's coming from within the team. So, I don't think I'm like a massive sort of innovator really, but sometimes I'm kind of maybe good at listening to voices where someone will go, I think that we should be doing that, or I've got an idea. So sometimes it's more about, fanning the flames of someone's, ember or embryonic ideas, and then supporting them to make that happen. And sometimes you go around the organisation and you see really, really good people or really good ideas and you're like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you don't always know what the answer is. And then you until you see it and then you go, I think that's it. And then it's about trying to help that person to thrive or work with their team to thrive.
Yes, we've got these amazing staff members who are on the ground and they're doing it all, all day, every day.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's those people who have got that knowledge and can be like, this bit's missing, we've got this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think
then you come into
so
make that happen.
I think sometimes as a CEO, one of the things that you do get to see, and like this is hopefully not in a scary way, I don't want to terrify, you see everything.
Oh.
So you kind of, or at least you're aware of everything. So you kind of, I know a little bit about nearly everything that happens in the Wildlife Trust, but I also get to see what others outside the Wildlife Trust are doing. So whether that's in other Wildlife Trusts, other organisations. So as a CEO, you have to you build quite a big network, of other partners, other organisations, even, politicians, water companies, highways companies, quite a kind of an amazing, you end up with like an amazing address book.
Yeah.
And so sometimes what that means is you can kind of see how other organisations either have maybe solved a problem that we have or could help.
Right.
So some of that I think is where I do find that quite exciting. So can I give another example?
Yeah.
So there's something called Green Northern Connections. So there's a partnership called Nature North, and I sit on the board of Nature North.
Yeah.
And that's all the environmental organisations of the north of England working together. And the wildlife trusts are leading on Green Northern Connections. And basically we talk about the fact that, wildlife, it's never going to thrive if it's only sitting in isolated sites.
Yeah.
Even if those places are really, really big, like you mentioned Little Walden Moss, 150 hectares. And
107.
Now 100. Well, there's Caddy's Head and Astley, but you get these kind of big chunks, don't you?
Yeah.
And then, working with Natural England, and they've sort of acquired their land, so they can make it even bigger. But ultimately, wildlife needs to be connected with other habitats in order that it can move. Sadly, in the changing climate, it's going to have to slowly move further north or further up hills and things.
Yeah, we can see species sort of moving north all the time, can't we?
Or you end up with species where you get a kind of almost like an inbred gene pool, or if there is a crisis, there's like a moorland fire or something, and suddenly the species die out and then they can't get back. So we need wildlife to be interconnected. That's really difficult to do that in a modern urban society, and with so much sort of food being grown in like we have in our county. So how do you do that? Well, one of the observations was that although in one sense, our road and rail and energy network is a barrier to wildlife being able to spread. Yeah. In another way, the verges of all those networks is a way for wildlife to spread. Yeah. And we know that's happened for certain species of plant, for instance, where they literally are using the railway verges to spread around all the way around the country, or certain kind of bee species have used it as well. Yeah. So there's a really good sort of observation there that if we don't just work with the usual suspects and work with the conservation sector, actually we could make really big impact if we work with the kind of transport and energy infrastructure.
Yeah.
And what you discover is that there are really passionate ecologists and environmentalists sort of working within those organisations. So to work with them, looking at how we can get more benefit from either the management of their land, or even land adjacent to their land, to kind of feed in. Some of that has been really satisfying and really rewarding, where you're kind of working outside of your sector to try and make change on a really, really big scale.
So what's the big vision? Like if you, in a perfect world, what does the natural environment look like in 20, 50, 100 years, something like that? What are we going for? What are we trying to achieve here?
I think one of the amazing things is we don't really know. I mean, I think if you were interviewing me for, I don't know, we were scratching old Bakelite records or something for broadcast on early radio 100 years ago. If you think about, Lancashire in 1925, we were recovering from the First World War. Would have been very, very heavily industrial. The rivers would have been in a lot worse state than they are now. We know that, otters have been reclaiming the rivers across Greater Manchester. They wouldn't have been here. An area like where I live up in North Lancashire, there were very few trees. There was a very heavily, the uplands were very, very heavily grazed. So whether it was, the industry or the agriculture was very, very different, and yet there would have been a lot more wildlife. Weirdly, it's certainly in the countryside, maybe not in the towns, but in the countryside. So, because it was sort of pre-industrial agriculture, before pesticides and forever chemicals and fertilizers and all of this, much more mixed agriculture. So speaking to someone in 1925 about what wildlife was like now, and the natural environment would be like now, I think it would have been unthinkable. And the fact that, really common species in the countryside would have died out, people wouldn't have believed. At the same time that, I don't know, otters, in Manchester, or, whether it's Wigan or Liverpool, sort of the amount of wildlife that there is now, like deep in the heart of the cities and would have been unthinkable. So I think that's my first answer, is we just don't really know. But I think there are some general principles that we can come back to. And I'm going to look at this from hopefully quite a positive place, kind of an optimistic place. And as the Wildlife Trust, we are, like a lot of environmental organisations, there was the Lawton report of a few years ago, which still drives a lot of the work that we do. And what John Lawton said, and he's still the president of Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, is that we need more, bigger, better, and joined up. I mean, you can put those words in any order. So if we take bigger, so what we're obviously fighting for is that the core wildlife sites are even bigger. So we want there to be, not just kind of small nature reserves, but we want there to be, bigger nature reserves, bigger places where the only function of those places is, nature, wildlife, and the services that nature then provides. It might be water, clean air, natural flood management, health and well-being, I don't know, tourism, recreation, whatever. But those health, those places. So we want those places to be bigger. So whether it's on Chat Moss or Wyn Marley or nature reserves in the West Pennines or North Lancashire, we want those core sites to be bigger. We want there to be more of them. We want them to be better, so we want them to be more resilient, and we want them to be better connected. So I think all of that is the kind of stock answer. But I think what that implies is that there will be places that probably have been kind of abandoned from their current usage. So the government a couple of years ago worked on the land use framework. I think the land use framework is really helpful because often you can hear, there is an argument that says we shouldn't be turning things over for wildlife because we have to be self-sufficient in food. Or other products. We clearly need, solar farms and, we need houses. We need, you can't just have a world where everything is for nature because, yes, we need a thriving natural world as humans, but
but we
you
also
can't
need
be a
space to live.
Yeah, we do, exactly. Yeah. So not everywhere can be a kind of rewilded landscape. But what the land use framework does do is it says, well, it's probably not a brilliant idea to rewild the places that are going to grow loads and loads of food for you. But there are places which actually don't grow a lot of food, or where it's really, really difficult to grow food. And some of these are naturally, being sort of abandoned for food growing, and actually, enabling nature to come in and reclaim those places, that probably is a sensible thing to do. Or on the kind of more marginal areas, to make sure that the funding that the government is providing, or some of the other projects that we can instigate, is helping farmers in those areas to not have to be maximising food production, but to be working much more with nature towards nature-friendly farming, so that actually that's a landscape where there's still livelihoods, but those livelihoods are being done in a way where almost like nature is part of the crop and the value, or it might be the ecosystem services. Sorry for some jargon. The other things that land can provide. So if that land, we're working with United Utilities at the moment in the West Pennine Moors. If the farming is basically saving United Utilities money because the water that's ending up in the reservoirs is cleaner and needs less treatment, then actually the farmers should actually be
paid for that.
Should be paid for that service. Or at the moment, in Greater Manchester, one of the big things is the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham. One of his big drivers at the moment is preventing flooding. And trying to reduce flash flooding. He absolutely understands, as do the combined authority, that the water, of where most people are living in Greater Manchester is coming off the moors. So therefore, anything that's helping to keep the water on the moors is helping, the people of Manchester. It's helping to reduce costs for the Environment Agency and the insurance industry. So actually, getting that money onto the moorlands to hold the water up there for longer. So I think my vision would be that there is more money going to farmers and managers of the land. Not just to us as the Wildlife Trust, but in any capacity, to be providing the services that are, helping society. So I think for me, my vision is not so much just about where wildlife is living and how much there is. Yes, I want more, please. We all want more. We want more species. We want more abundance of those species. We want there to be clouds of butterflies and songbirds, everywhere you go. Of course we want that. But we also want the underlying structures and mechanisms of the economy and of government policy to be supporting that, so that the finances mean that it is worth your while as an owner of land or as a manager of land to be providing the wildlife. You don't want it to be a sacrifice, like I'm going to make less money, but it's okay because I've got songbirds. We want we want the politics and the economy to be driving those activities and those behaviours that mean we have a wildlife rich kind of area,
And what's going to stop that? What are the challenges that could actually kind of stop this from happening? And what role do we play as Lancashire Wildlife Trust, via you?
So I think
in making that happen.
So I think what was interesting about again, when we, if I go back to Paris, and it is sometimes interesting just to look at another kind of country. The bottom line is that a lot of the money for doing those works was public money.
Right.
And they understood that you got public goods and a healthier society from investing public money in nature and clean water and in a livable city. So ultimately, it is driven by, policymakers, decision makers, government, national level, government at local level. As the Wildlife Trusts Federation, it's brilliant because we cover Lancashire, Manchester and North Merseyside, but we have a seat at the table of all the 47 wildlife trusts, and then we are able to lobby government. So at the moment there's a lot going on with something like the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. The Planning and Infrastructure Bill might sound really boring, but ultimately that the law that's going to come out of that is going to affect when planning happens, whether wildlife and natural habitats and the services they provide will be embedded within all new development, or whether new development will basically be allowed to sort of build out all over existing habitats and destroy it. So we have to make sure that we're influencing, that government. And that isn't really my job, but I can be one voice amongst 47.
Yes.
I won't say exactly the detail, but last week I had to write a letter within days. We heard that the government had decided that it wasn't going to change. It was to do with national landscapes and the duty that protection the national landscapes have. We'd heard that already the government decided that it wasn't worth that battle.
Right.
And so sometimes you write a letter and you get an immediate response. Sometimes it's a much sort of slower burn. But I think really as a local wildlife trust, the levels of influence that we can make will be much more at that kind of local authority level.
Yeah.
I actually think that the combined authorities, I think, are really, really good in that regard.
Okay.
And I think it's much easier probably, for us to influence Greater Manchester or Liverpool City region at the moment probably than it is in Lancashire. So right. I'm quite excited about new combined authority for Lancashire. I think that would be really good because you can embed, the local nature recovery strategies exist at kind of county level, and that's something that we can influence. So the ability to help to identify sites on which nature recovery should be enabled as part of an interconnected network. It's fantastic that was government policy, but then the local nature recovery strategies that are produced are done at that kind of county level or combined authority level. So to be able to influence that is brilliant.
Yeah.
So whether it is, the amount of local money that's invested in what we call nature-based solutions. So, the ability of money to go to the moors to help prevent flooding in the city.
Yeah.
You can influence that as a wildlife trust, and you can influence that as a CEO. You can go to the meetings and you go, I think this is a really good idea. What do you think? And by the way, my team of staff and the volunteers who work with us and the partners we work with have shown you that we are doing this.
You can achieve.
I do at Bickershaw, say, and then you're looking at flooding at Platt Bridge, and you're going, well, actually, what that we did at Bickershaw, could we just move a tiny bit and then help prevent flooding here? Or, the amazing work that we've done through My Place on green social prescribing, or in the Bay, Morecambe Bay, but looking at how we're using nature and access to nature as well of helping people get better, that's clearly influencing local health policy. And yes, at national level, it's ultimately about what the NHS thinks and what the government thinks. But at local level, if we can influence, local GPs or local CAMS services, mental health services, to prescribe nature, and if we can even get direct commissions from those local integrated care boards or foundation trusts, to actually commission us to be delivering the services that then they can prescribe into, that's a massive game changer. And we can influence that both by proving that it's possible to deliver the services from the real stories of real people who've benefited from those, or by going along to the meetings and kind of lobbying the NHS that actually, of course, they need to give us some of their money to enable this, because it's cheaper for them and it's more effective for the for the patients. Yeah. So there's a few different answers really. But.
No, that's brilliant. And sadly, we're kind of coming towards the end of the time we've got for today. But if you just wanted to leave us with one fairly short thought about why do you do it? Well, what gets you out of bed in the morning? Why do you do what you do all day?
Yeah, I mean, so I've got a few sort of favourite experiences that I've had. I think, as I said earlier, you live vicariously through other people. So the thing that gets you up in the morning really is meeting people who have benefited directly from the work that we do. Yeah. So for me to sort of, hear that someone, has been really inspired by a member of my team. They went to a local talk or something and they were just like, I'd had a really, really bad week. Frankly, I've had a really bad year. And actually I've got hope again because, your lovely, enthusiastic staff were talking to me about the local project near where I live, and now I want to get involved, or that's got me up into bed. I like hearing those stories. Yeah. Or people who've benefited from one of our green social prescribing projects, you know, and actually literally, you know, I've met people who couldn't leave their house, who are now gone on to get jobs in wildlife or in educational or social services because they came through one of our programs. Like, that is amazing. That really gets you up in the morning.
Yeah.
And I think there's another probably slightly more selfish answer, but you know, amazing things can sort of happen and you never really know what that amazing thing is going to be happening on that day.
Yeah.
So when I was growing up and inspired by David Attenborough, or you know, like seeing amazing wildlife out there in the world, wanting to make a difference. You know, if I'd known then some of the things that I've actually ended up being involved in, I would have probably pinched myself and thought, actually, it's going to be, you know, it'll be okay.
It can be pretty special.
So I think, so for me, like, so releasing the sand lizards at the Fylde sand dunes, that was probably one of my best days
Another
ever at work.
podcast episode coming up later today.
And because I know I'm the CEO, so I kind of went along to kind of, you know, be there, and then I actually was allowed to actually take sand lizards out of the sort of box, and there's a volunteer with his vivarium in his back garden where they'd bred the sand lizards in a sort of homemade sand dune in his back garden. And then like we took, like, it was all done, you know, sort of under kind of professional kind of guidance, but and expertise. But he was amazing and sort of was there with these sand lizards, and then I got to actually take them out and have them in my hand, and then take them and release them.
Wow.
Actually into the sand dune, not just into a sand dune, but a sand dune that hadn't been there a few years before, which we had been involved with the Fylde Council and hundreds of volunteers planting Christmas trees to trap the sand.
Yeah.
That meant there was a habitat for the sand lizards to actually live in. And then the moment where you release them and then you see them like burrowing into the sand dune, like, that is amazing.
That's pretty great.
That is amazing, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's been really great to talk to you. So everyone at home, if you're wondering how you can help or support the work that we're doing across the entire of Lancashire, Manchester and North Merseyside, one of the really amazing things people could do is sign up, become a member. Membership starts from just £4 a month, and what might feel like quite a small amount can actually make a really big difference. The other thing, sign up to our newsletter. There's loads of information about all the different things that's happening across the trust. So yeah, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again soon.